The Terps versus Indiana is by far Maryland's biggest game so far this year.
You are Locked On Terps, your daily podcast on the Maryland Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? I'm Tre Moore, host of Locked On Terps, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So thank you for making us part of your day, and also publisher at InsideBlackandGold.net. Make sure you guys go over to InsideBlackandGold.net for all your Maryland news. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. I think that this week against Indiana is not only the biggest game so far this year, I think it could determine how our year goes. And I also think right now it's looking like our biggest game of the year. When a lot of people hear biggest game of the year, a lot of times they think, oh, it's the best team that you'll play this year. But for Maryland in college football, that's not always what it is. Indiana's a really good team, don't get me wrong, but they're not the best team we play this year. But I still think that they could actually be our biggest game of the season. I think this game is extremely important based off of how the rest of the year is going to go. I think it's a turning point for the year. I think it's a turning point on our schedule. And I think that this game against the Indiana Hoosiers could really mean a lot for how our season is going to end, what our team looks like at the end, how we go for the next half of the season, how we handle some of the big games, and I'll make sure to get all of that in there. First of all, Indiana's really good. So definitely our biggest game of the season so far. It's the best team we've played. They've beaten everybody, and it hasn't been close. They beat FIU 31-7, nothing too crazy there. But then they put 77 up against Western Illinois. They beat Western Illinois 77-3, which is honestly just insane. I don't know how you beat a team by that much, but still, it's Western Illinois, so we're not going to write home about it. But they also beat UCLA 42-13, which is a Big Ten team now. UCLA, of course, in the Big Ten. So they were able to dominate UCLA, where their quarterback, Curtis Rourke, looked like a top-notch type of guy. Went 25-33, threw for 307 yards for 4 touchdowns. And recently they beat Charlotte 52-14. So I'm looking at their scores. I'm looking at what they've done. I'm looking at kind of the spread and where Vegas values them. And I say, they're the best team we've played this year. And it's not even really that close. I know we took a loss to Michigan State, but still, we were supposed to win that game. When you just look at, I kind of like the Vegas lines to give you a good representation about where a team stands, where they lie next to us. If you looked at the Vegas, the odds and the lines of the game, they had us as 9.5 favorites against Michigan State. And if we played them again, I think we would still be favorites. And that's a game we should have won. Even though it was a huge game at home, I think this game against Indiana is even bigger. I think it's a bigger game. It's on the road. It's going to be our biggest road test of the year. And then also you could say Virginia was a pretty good opponent. And yeah, we might have been barely favorites or even underdogs in that game. It's basically a pick 'em. But I do still think that Indiana is the best team we play by far this season. And the spread and what Vegas thinks and what other people think, and kind of the consensus is that Indiana is the best team we've played so far this year. They're 7-point favorites against us. So us beating Indiana, I'm not going to say it's an upset technically, like when we're talking real terms, but on paper, in the math books, it might be a little bit of an upset for us to beat the Indiana Hoosiers. They're better this year than they've been, and you could consider them the top 25 team. I think they're that kind of good so far this year, but I think it's definitely a team that we can beat. So I think so far it's the best team we played this year. When you look at how Vegas sets it up, when you look at how they've played against other teams, it's the best team we've played. The fact that it's on the road, But then also, I think it's the most important game we've played so far this year, and that we might play this entire year. When I really look at the Maryland schedule, I look at it and I say, this Indiana game's big. Could be the deciding factor, kind of how things flow this season for the Maryland Terrapins. Of course, right now, we've lost one game. We're 3-1 currently, with only one loss to Michigan State in a game we should have won. We should have easily been 4-0 going to this game and brought some more hype into this game, but still can't go back in the past and fix things. But we're 3-1 going into this Indiana game. After this, we hit, or I can't even say after this. Really after the Villanova game, it was going to be a really hard stretch of games, and that's what I kind of see this Indiana game starts a back end of the season. That's not easy for the Maryland Terrapins now. But if we win this game, it could create massive momentum going forward. If we win this game that takes place at Indiana on Saturday afternoon, 12 p.m. game on September 28th, this Saturday. If we win this game, I feel a lot better about us going into Northwestern and the team's confidence or Northwestern comes to us, but for us coming back home against Northwestern, I feel a lot better about being 4-1. I feel a lot better about being 4-1 rather than going to 3-2. And we really start to have to look at things in the mirror and say, Virginia's the only quality team that we've beaten. Do we have to switch things up? I feel a lot better about the Terps being 4-1 going into Northwestern. And then also, you got to look at it. We have USC right after Northwestern. Like, this Indiana game is huge in determining how we kind of start this stretch where we have USC, Oregon in about a month and a couple of weeks, with some really hard games. Rutgers has been good. Minnesota's a quality team. Like, there's a lot of hard games. So I look at this Indiana game as it's not right in the middle of our season, but it's that turning point into we're rid of these little boys. I don't want to say little boy programs, but these smaller programs that Maryland's expected to beat by a lot of points. We're done with the UConns. We're done with the Villanovas. Even Virginia and Michigan State are good teams, but they're not what Indiana is. And so I say we're done with these games, I don't want to say warm-up games because we've lost one of them, but we're done with some of these easier games, to be quite frank with you guys, and we're headed towards bigger games. And I think the reason I also say that Indiana feels like the biggest game of the year, because it feels like a team that's at a similar point as us in the Big Ten. And to get to the next point in the Big Ten, to get to what a Penn State, to what an Ohio State is, and a Michigan and those types of programs, I'm not saying we're there, or an Oregon. I'm not saying that we're close. But if you want to get out of that middle ground where Maryland has been the last couple of years, you got to beat the teams in the middle ground. Now, it didn't help losing to Michigan State, but a team like Indiana has been a middle ground team, and they look like they're trying to make a move to a top of the middle grounds where I think Maryland kind of wants to be. And so I think when you look at it that way, you say Indiana and Maryland, they match up pretty closely. It feels like it should be somewhat of a close game. Two teams in the Big Ten that want to prove that they can compete with some of the upper teams in the Big Ten. It's a really important game for that reason, for the Terps to prove themselves as a team that can win really against really solid opponents in the Big Ten. Not the big dogs in the Big Ten, but can beat and be better than a lot of the middle-ish programs in the Big Ten. And beating Indiana can prove that. As well as I think it's a huge game in the season, because if we drop to 0-2 in Big Ten play, things aren't going to look good. With still 0-2 in Big Ten play, with still having USC, Oregon, and Penn State on the schedule, that isn't something you can do. Losing to Michigan State really hurts in terms of the Big Ten. I'm dropping that one. So when you look at this Indiana game, you say, we've got to win that one. We've got to win that game, because if we drop one to Indiana, things don't look good. Things don't look right, and things won't look upwards for the Big Ten. We're going to be sitting at the bottom of the conference 0-2. So I think it's a turning point this year. I think Indiana is a team that compares really well with us, and I think it's a really important game, arguably the most important game of the season for the Terps to win, and it will kind of decide how the rest of the season goes. A lot of you guys have been asking for some basketball. We'll talk a brief basketball in Maryland football and my expectations this year for Maryland basketball. Excuse me. I'm so used to saying football. We'll talk about some expectations of Maryland basketball and the program overall, what I'm kind of seeing on social media and different things. We'll talk about that after this ad from LinkedIn and Roy. It's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered in sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary. Voids or where prohibited. This week we've selected Ty Felton because of how well he played. I'm giving Ty Felton 100 on Roy. If you were impressed as we were with his performance on Saturday, you can show him some love too. Just hop on Roy and throw in a few bucks. If everyone pitches in just 10, it adds up fast for a player. Now you have the chance to show your appreciation for guys in college football and their performances and their standout type of plays, as well as that. Hopefully, Ty Felton will continue to build your program. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy, or support the players. Change the game with Roy. When you're hiring for a small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps hire professionals you can find anywhere else, and even those who aren't actively searching for a job but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, or over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit another leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like professionals on LinkedIn. LinkedIn knows that small businesses are wearing so many hats and might not have the time or resources to hire. So LinkedIn is constantly finding ways to make the process easier. They even just launched a feature that helps you write job descriptions, making the process even easier and quicker. 2.5 small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Let's talk some hoops. A lot of people have been wanting to talk basketball, and with the season coming closer and closer, them having their first practice a couple days ago, I thought a Wednesday, it's a good break from football. I feel like we just grind a lot of football, but at the end of the day, Maryland's a basketball school, and that's where a lot of the money lies. That's what a lot of you guys care about. So I do want to talk a little bit of basketball and just some early season, way too early expectations for Maryland basketball. And here I have a couple. I think one, Maryland has to be a tournament team this year. We're way too talented not to be. I think that this team has everything you could want and should be a tournament team. I don't see like a clear weakness on this team anymore. I thought Kevin Willard did a really good job going into the portal and also picking up some recruits. One in particular, to say that we feel good about this roster. I think this roster is a really more than capable of making not only the tournament, but to make a run in the tournament. I think when I really get into what we have this year and kind of what players are back, what players we gained, this team's pretty special, I feel like, on paper. We have plenty of guys that look like top-notch type of talent. So I think there's no reason why we can't make the tournament. I think when we look at it, we have guards. Jacoby Gillespie is going to be a really good player for us. Jacoby Gillespie at guard. Rodney Rice we picked up. Sean Harris-Smith going into his sophomore year should make a jump. 3 very capable guys right there that should be top end players, I think, in the Big Ten, as well as Celton McGuell is a shooter, which we much needed. And I think when you just look at the guard and we look at that, Chance Stevens comes back from injury. We have a lot of really good players. Malachi Palmer, the freshman. So that's just purely the guards where I think we needed to improve from last year. We needed to get better shooting the ball. Jacoby Gillespie shot a really good percentage last year from 3. Rodney Rice is known as a really good shooter. Celton McGuell is known as a really good shooter. Chance Stevens, who we got back, might have been the best shooter on our team last year, but he was hurt the entire year. So we added a lot of shooting, which we much needed, and I think that was our biggest weakness last year. And then, of course, with 5-star Derek Queen coming in, who's ranked as a lot of people the best, maybe could have the biggest impact in the entire country out of all the freshmen. I know there's some big names over there at Rutgers. They have those 2 kids, Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper, that are supposed to be really good, and Cooper Flagg and whatever. But Derek Queen is a legit shot to be the best freshman in the Big Ten and the entire country in terms of the numbers. And then Julian Reese, the star coming back, who's been an all Big Ten type of player. I think when I look at it, I'm like, preseason, I feel like Maryland could be in the top 25. I don't think they'll put us in the top 25, but give it a couple weeks. I feel like we should be able to climb into the top 25 because I think we have a really good team. And I think that when I look at it, March Madness is definitely the standard. I think you should be able to get a pretty high seed. I see us as like a 6 or a 5 seed. That's kind of how I see us right now. And I don't see why we couldn't get that. But I think that if we don't get a March Madness bid, if we don't end up being a top 5 or 6 team in the Big Ten, I'm going to be screaming Kevin Willard is not the guy. And I think that's fair. Last year I cut him some slack because I said that the roster just wasn't that good. Roster wasn't that good last year. And part of that is on Kevin Willard, but we also got to be like, he did, Maryland was expected to finish in the top 3, and he did bring in a top 25 recruiting class with 3 4-stars, but 2 of them didn't really work out at the Maryland program. And I cut him some slack because I just felt like we didn't have anyone that could shoot the ball, and Kevin Willard can't just turn a light on in people's heads to be able to shoot the ball. But I feel definitely some of it was his fault, but I do felt like I gave him a year because I felt he made the tournament in year 1. This is a down year 2. Let's see what he does in year 3. He did an excellent job with this roster, but now you got to do it with the coaching. If we don't make the tournament, I feel like it's fair to say his job should be done. But I think we do make the tournament. I do think Kevin Willard will continue to recruit well and will continue to get guys. We just got a big-time recruit that I talked about a couple episodes ago. And looking at it, we just have so much talent. I can't see us not being good with the amount of guys we got back, the amount of top-level players that we have. I think we should have a really good program this year. And if not, I think you got to look to fire Kevin Willard. But, yeah, I'm expecting a top 5 program in the Big Ten. I'm expecting a top 6 or 7 bid in March Madness in terms of where our ranking is in our seeding. But honestly, if we just get into the dance, I think his job is probably safe. But I think this is a team that has a tournament run in them. We have experience. We have some youth players that are really good. We have some really good transfers. I think the team looks like one of the better teams we've had in a while. So I'm excited to see what we can do. The season is going to start soon, but I did want to give you guys my expectations before we get started. Maryland football suffers one of their first decommitments in the 2025 class. I'll talk about that after this ad from FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start this season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Also, Thursday Night Football is coming up, and there's a big game, Cowboys versus Giants. If you want to take the Cowboys -6, you can do that on FanDuel, or the Giants +6. So just visit FanDuel. That's FanDuel.com. So Maryland's 2025 class definitely takes a little bit of I'll say a little bit of pain after we lose out on Maryland 2025 commit Jet Light, who I thought was honestly a pretty good player. Was one of our first commitments. Actually, I think he was our first. I think he was our first commitment actually, and I think his recruiting ranking has kind of dropped off a little bit. I'm not even trying to hate because he decommitted. He started off as like a 4-star, but he's kind of dropped off. He committed at one time, and then he committed to Maryland on January 6th, is what it says on 3. And he's now the number 598th player, number 52 ranked corner in the 2025 class. So this is something for sure. I think that the thing about it is I feel okay about it. If there's any position that it feels like we have so many young, bright players that are getting time right now it's the corner position. It's a position that I feel like if we lose a guy or two at the corner position, I'm not going to die. I'm not going to be super upset because I feel like we have a lot of guys in the cornerback room that I feel good about that are young. Now, have they played awesome football when they've gotten a chance this year? No, but some of that's to be expected, and for us to be like, yeah, we got to give these guys some times. Like Braden Lee, like some of these other guys on our team, we've recruited the corner position really well. And there's a lot of really good players, especially in the 2024 class, that are at Maryland right now that are really good players. And I think that losing Jet White, a corner, definitely isn't awesome, but it's definitely not the end of the world. Our 2025 class is also still a really good class. So I think that if we didn't have as many of these blue chippers like Messiah Delhomme, like Jalen Gilchrist, like Zymir Smith, like Bryce Jenkins, like some of these other guys, then maybe I'd be a little bit more hurt about it. Like Malik Washington, of course, can't forget Malik Washington. I'd be a little bit more butthurt about it. But honestly, since we have so many top-end blue chip guys in the class, it's really not going to kill us losing Jet White. And we already have a lot of really good freshman corners on the team that are playing, that are getting time. And I maybe argue that they're not ready, but they're still really good players overall. So I think that when you look at it, you say losing Jet White definitely isn't awesome. And I thought he had a really bright future as a Maryland player, but it's also like we're going to be all right without him, to be completely honest, because we have plenty of other guys that are really good players, like Kevin Humes, like Braden Lee, like Judah Jenkins, all in the secondary that are clearly playing high level at a practice, but they haven't figured it out quite at Maryland yet. So I think it's not the end of the world. I think that it's okay that we lost out on Jet White and that we'll figure it out without him. I don't think he's a guy that is like, oh my gosh, it really hurts. And I think having a couple of guys leave right now open up a spot for a couple of flips on signing day for Coach Loxley. And we know that's something that Coach Loxley has done a really good job at, and something that we know that could happen. That usually happens. It's usually around the holiday time, or it is always around the holiday time when the signing day. They call it, what did they called it, like something like with Coach Loxley, they have like a saying, I forget what it is, that he always is flipping guys on signing day. He is always due for a big flip. Last year we were able to get Braden Lee. There was a lot of conversations around Jordan Seaton potentially going to Maryland, and I thought it could happen. That would have been really cool for us because he's playing really high-level football over at Colorado. He's their starting tackle, so I think he ended up being at the right spot. But I think that losing Jet White is by no means the end of the world. We have plenty of good talent that are playing right now that are freshmen, and then we also still have some guys in these other recruiting classes that are good players too. So I'm not really too concerned about it at all. That's all we have for today. Thank you for listening to Locked on Terps. Make sure you like and subscribe. We're here every day talking Maryland football and basketball. So thank you for listening to Locked on Terps.